Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is the Tetra fish and the compatibility with your community discus tank. Now this is something that most of us who own discus find that we want to put some dither fish in there, and Tetra is typically the one that we go to. But there are some do's and don'ts in the Tetra family that are common misconceptions about compatibility with discus fish, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But we're going to talk about the top three, working our way down from third to number one as far as what I think are the best Tetras for your tank. Before we do that, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button. Also give me a like on this video when you get a chance. And hopefully you will leave some comments down below and give me your experience. I'd like to know what you guys have experienced with the Tetras that you are putting in your community discus tank, and compare some notes here. But let's start with number 3 on my list, and that is the Black Neon Tetra. This is an absolutely overlooked Tetra for whatever reason. I have no idea why. They're just absolutely an elegant fish in every way, shape, and form. And I think that these guys just don't get the attention that they deserve, and people just don't realize the compatibility of these fish with the discus in your community tank. These are a large enough Tetra to where you're adding them to your tank. They're not going to be seen as a food source. They're also very compatible as far as temperature goes and that sort of thing, as long as you're running some air stones in your tank and you have good water flow across the top of your tank, good wave action and that sort of thing. These guys are going to do absolutely fine. Now I keep most of my tanks at 86 degrees, and a lot of people are going to go, whoa, how does the Black Neon or any Tetra handle those temperatures? Well, the reality of it is they do. And it's something that I've experimented with. I have 9 discus tanks in my home here, and all 9 of them have different varieties of Tetras in there, and the ones that I'm talking about do just fine. So get that out of your mind. Like I said, I'm keeping my tanks at around 86 degrees. The Black Neon Tetra does fine with that. And it is something, as I said, as long as you've got some air stones in there and you're adding that little bit of extra oxygen in there, because as we know, the higher the temperatures are in an aquarium, the less oxygen is available, so that air stone becomes a very important factor in your tank. Now I want to talk to you about number 2 on my list here, and it's something you maybe have never even thought about adding to your discus tank, and that is the Bloodfin Tetra. These are absolutely beautiful fish in every way. They've got that sort of grayish silver body with the red tail, the red dorsal fin, the red anal fin, and they're just absolutely a beautiful fish in every sense of the word. Again, these guys are able to withstand temperatures of 86 degrees and do just fine with that, as long as, like I said, you have an air stone in your tank and you have good water flow and good water turnover. Now these are an absolutely beautiful fish. I'm going to leave some pictures up in each one of these segments as I go through them of these particular fish, and kind of give you a sense of what they look like, so that you can make a really good qualifying decision as to whether or not you think these fish will add something to your tank. Bloodfin Tetras do a fantastic job of hanging out in that center column again, and again, a very important area of the tank where you're going to get to see these fish. They're great schoolers. They tend to move with each other, but they can also shoal a little bit. And I don't know why. Sometimes they're better at schooling, and other times they're better at shoaling. There's no reason in particular for this, but I would tell you that just having them in your tank and having them occupy that middle portion of your tank, you're really going to be happy with them. Now, I want to talk about a couple of different things before we get to number 1 here, and that is absolutely not using other types of tetras for your discus tanks, because they can become a fish that is targeted as a food source. And the first one that comes to mind that I've had problems with, and many of my friends have had problems with, because they like the color and everything, they're tempted to add this, and that's the neon tetra. Now, again, this is on my list of not to do's. Before we get to the number one, I want to talk a little bit about tetras that I absolutely believe you should not put in your tank. And the neon tetra is one of those. Notice that every time I've tried this, they've either been attacked by the discus right away, or over a series of days and weeks they just simply disappear in the tank because they're killed by the discus fish. And I have no idea why this happens, other than they are on the smaller side of the discus family and can be seen as a fish that is more of a food source for your discus, even though they find out once they kill them they really can't swallow them, but they will kill them anyway. So it's really something that you need to do your homework on and pay attention to. Now, this next fish that I'm going to talk about, which I don't recommend again for a discus community tank, is the cardinal tetra. Even though these guys are a little bit bigger, unless you're finding wilds that are a little bit beefier and a little larger, they're not going to, again, do very well for the exact same reasons as the neon tetra. And the third one in this group that I absolutely would tell you do not put in your community discus tank is the ember tetra. And the reason for that is these guys are very small, they're very flashy, and they're very much something that is going to be attracted by your discus fish, and they're going to go after them. And it's not going to be long before whatever ember tetras you put into your tank, over a week or two, they're all going to be gone and they're going to die rather quickly. They don't have problems with the temperature. None of these discus that I'm talking about really have problems with the temperatures in the tank. What we're talking about in this particular situation is the issue of whether or not they are compatible with discus fish because of the possibility that they can look like a food source to them, and before they find out that they really can't eat them, they will kill them anyway. And it's very difficult to watch. As I actually saw this take place in one of my tanks one time early on when I really didn't know what I was doing. I added 20 discus, or not discus, but neon tetras to my tank, and they were a little bit older. I thought they were large enough. As soon as I put them in there after taking them out of quarantine, within, I would say, 10 or 15 minutes, almost all of them were either damaged and disfigured in some way, because the discus fish were just attacking them left and right as soon as I started putting them in the tank. I couldn't get them out of there fast enough. There was nothing I could do. I saved, I think, around 5 or 7 of them, and after that they were pretty much dead at that point. Now I want to talk about the number one tetra that I find is an absolute must for any discus tank, and probably the most compatible, the most beautiful, and fun to watch for multiple reasons, and I'll get into that in just a second. That is the number one discus compatible tetra is the Rumynose Tetra, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one, this is a fish that will hang out in the bottom part of your tank, and this is important because your discus are mid-fish kind of guys, and they're really not paying attention to that bottom part of the tank unless they're feeding. And Rumynose tetras also are a little bit larger than most other tetras that you're going to find in the tetra family. This gives them a little bit more of a chance of survival. Another reason why is their bodies are light in color, and they're not as flashy to your discus as some of the other tetras might be. Now, I recommend getting wild Rumynose if you can. If you can't find them, make sure you're getting your Rumynose from a good supplier, somebody that is raising these in conditions where they're larger, they're fat, and they're very, very healthy fish. If you are able to find that, that would be a good scenario, but it's not likely that you're going to. If you can get wilds, they are absolutely the best fish for your community discus tank. Now, the other thing that I love about these fish is that really cool red nose that they have and that black and white flag on their tail on the other end, which really makes these fish very unique in color. And to watch these guys zip along almost with exact, I don't know, the schooling is just amazing. It's such a tight school, and they just zip through the bottom of the tank and sometimes up into the center area of the tank. But for the most part, they zip through the bottom of the tank, and they are just beautiful fish to watch against the rocks and the greenery of a planted aquarium especially. And they do very, very, very well. And it's one of my favorites, as I said. Now, most of you who I've talked to absolutely love the Rumynose Tetra for different reasons. But you've got to be careful a little bit here, because these fish are susceptible to diseases when you first get them. And this 86-degree temperature that I'm talking about, this is where this comes into play and makes these fish actually more survivable in these temperatures than you would think in a cooler temperature. And the reason for that is that the most important thing about these fish, as I said, is the disease factor. And the number one disease that these guys can get is ick. I've seen Rumynose Tetras that look perfectly fine when I receive them, and I come in the next morning and they look like somebody took a salt shaker and poured it all over them, because they developed ick that fast, and they were in temperatures of 78 to 80 degrees. And as we all know, if you've been in the hobby for a while, ick cannot live in anything above 86 degrees, or I should say 85 degrees. 86 degrees is really that level in which ick can't live. So you won't see these fish get the number one killer of them, because the temperatures are just too high in the tank. I really, really love these fish, and I think you will too. If you haven't tried Rumynose Tetras in your tank, absolutely go out and find some. Try, like I said, to get the wild ones that are a little bit bigger and a little more healthy, and put them in your tank. Their immune systems are a little bit better. These are a fish that have been bred just unbelievably, so the tank raised ones are just not the quality and of the health that the wilds are. So, you know, there are like 7 varieties of Rumynose as well, and this is really defined mostly by a little bit of difference in the size of the tail and the shape of the flag that's on the tail, the black and white flag, and also how far that red nose may go down their face. Some Rumynose varieties have just a simple small red nose on them, and other varieties it covers half of their face. And that's something that's just a personal preference, and you'd have to find, but you can mix these guys. If you're not finding them all in one particular variety, you can mix and match them a little bit. You will seldom see much difference in them at all, but the behaviors will be exactly the same. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this was a video that was helpful for you and gives you a little bit of an idea of compatibility of Tetra fish in your Discus community tank. Once again, I want to make it very clear that you need to absolutely put these fish in quarantine tanks before you ever put them in with your Discus. The last thing you want to do is bring disease into your tank, and you can avoid that by making sure that you quarantine all of your fish that you're planning to add to any of your Discus tanks, or any tank for that matter, but especially your Discus tanks, because these fish are such a costly animal, and you don't want to make that mistake. Enjoy it. I hope that this was helpful in giving you some ideas of compatibility and reasons why. Again, try to avoid the Neon Tetra and the Cardinal Tetras, not simply because they're too small and that sort of thing, but again, these guys are not really the best with these higher temperatures, And always, again, add some air stones and make sure that your water turnover in your tank is very good, so that your tetras at these higher temperatures are getting enough oxygen. Because as we know, and I said earlier in the video, temperatures that are high, that means less oxygen in the tank. Therefore, you need these extra air stones and so forth to make sure that your tank is getting a lot of oxygen and that your fish are being supplied with oxygen that is very important to them. Again, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. Hit that like button, and again, if you have not subscribed already to the channel, please do, and leave your comments down below. Let me know today what your favorite Tetra is for a discus tank. Maybe something that I didn't even mention here that somebody else has knowledge of and can share that with us. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on any other Tetras that might be compatible with your discus community tank. Again, thank you for joining me. Until then, we will see you on the next one. We're out of here.